Another of the specimens that was found in Liaoning Province, published in National Geographic, July 1998. These are unquestionably feathers here. This is what gets so interesting. At times they show you a dinosaur creature with little filaments and say, a dinosaur with feathers. Other times they show you a bird. And so they can emphasize how feather-like they are in the bird and how dinosaur-like the dinosaur is. And so Caudipteryx has what are obviously feathers here, and yet they want to make it out to be a dinosaur with feathers. This is one that's clearly a bird. I don't think we could look at the long tail feathers. We have living birds that look like this. What's the bird with the long tail feathers? Slips my mind right now, but there are feathers that look, or birds that look much like this today. National Geographic, nonetheless, in 1999, published this statement: we can now say that birds are theropods, that's a type of a small dinosaur, just as confidently as we can say humans are mammals. So they don't have any doubt. This was one of the birds that they showed. See how dinosaur-like, and that they got feathers on it. And the artists can have lots of fun with this sort of thing. And it's very good at convincing people who don't look at the specimens themselves. What about the feathered dinosaur? Well, Storrs Olson, who is curator of birds at the Smithsonian Institute, sent an open letter. Now, this is pretty unusual. This fellow sent a letter out. It was really directed to Peter Raven, who I know quite well. He's the head of the Botanical Garden in St. Louis. And Peter Raven, or Dr. Raven's, in charge of sort of the scientific integrity of National Geographic. And Storrs Olson, curator of birds and an evolutionist himself, was so upset by the way that both the journal Nature and National Geographic played fast and loose with facts, saw fit to publish this publicly for everybody to read. And it says a lot more than what we have here, but this is enough. The idea of feathered dinosaurs and the theropod origin of birds is being actively promoted by a cadre of zealous scientists acting in concert with certain editors at Nature and National Geographic, who themselves have become outspoken and highly biased proselytizers of the faith. Truth and careful scientific weighing of evidence have been among the first casualties in their program, which is now fast becoming one of the grander scientific hoaxes of our age. You get the idea that the distinguished evolutionist feels they may have stepped over the line a little bit. And yet that's the stuff we're all reading, and I'm sure all the teachers are putting up on the classroom and the bulletin boards, and people are getting excited. Storrs Olson makes this comment, which is one of the more unambiguous comments I've ever read from a scientist. He said, with regard to the feathered dinosaur, there is not one undisputed example of a dinosaur with feathers. None. The public deserves to know this. Well, now you know. Here's another problem. Archaeopteryx was found 140 million years ago in the fossil record, give or take a week or two, one way or another. You know, I don't believe this date at all. I hope you know that. I'm with you on the young earth. But let's just take this for now. Here's the age of the bird, the feathered dinosaurs that they've been finding in China, and they're all 120 million years old. So you see, it doesn't really quite fit in time-wise either, along with a whole bunch of other problems. I guess this is the way they would look if it did happen, though. This is the famous Triceratops. So if you think dinosaurs are feeding in your bird feeder, keep your eye peeled for something like this. If you're disinclined to believe the dinosaurs are feeding in your bird feeder, maybe you might think this is just another of those ridiculous pictures I got from Ken Ham, which it is. Now, evolutionists insist that feathers really are basically scales. They say, hey, you can hardly tell them apart. This idea was really perpetuated, starting with Gerhard Heilmann back in 1927. He wrote a really seminal book called The Origin of Birds. Kind of kicked everything off. And in this book, he says the most striking peculiarity of birds is their plumage, their feathers, which apparently has nothing at all in common with the scaly covering of reptiles. So much more surprising is it on examining these structures in the microscope to learn that the feather is nothing but a further development of the scale. Anybody that believes that in here, I got a piece of swampland in Florida I'd like to sell. Anyway, let's just look at this in a really critical sort of way. But before we do, we'll show that he's not the only one. Alfred Roemer, very famous evolutionist, in his book Man and the Vertebrates, say Birds have been called glorified reptiles. Feathers are in reality almost their only distinctive feature. I mean, did lightning come out of the sky and strike this man at this point? If you know anything about birds, just for starters, they have lungs which are absolutely unique. No other vertebrate has lungs like a bird, certainly no dinosaur. They've actually got fossil impressions of lungs recently. They're very much like those of an alligator. So he says that feathers are just about it. If it wouldn't be for the feathers, bird, reptile, you could hardly tell a difference. Then he goes on to say, although these structures, the feathers, seem quite different, he's going to say the same thing as we read before, although they seem different from the horny scales that cover a reptile's body, the difference is, in reality, not very great. Now, this should be pretty straightforward stuff we have here right now. Either the difference is incredible and it'll blow you right out of your chair, or the difference is so subtle you'll have to look real careful to see the difference, okay? Would you like to kind of examine this for yourself? Is this really true that the scale and the feather are so similar that the differences are almost subtle? You be the judge on this. I had a technician working for me in the lab, and she had a pet boa constrictor. I said, the next time that little rascal sheds his skin, bring it in, we'll look at it in the scanning scope. So she did, and I took this picture. These are just a few of the scales. This is keratin here. It's a very hard form of keratin on the scale. And the middle is a really soft form of keratin, and that's good, because if that wasn't true, if it were all hard keratin, a snake would be kind of like a fishing pole, you just kind of hold it out and it just stick out there. Now, that's a reptilian scale. I want you people to plant that in your mind. Some of you may want to take notes and jot the distinctive features of the scale. Have you got it in your mind? Okay, we're going to bring up the feather. This is subtle stuff now, so watch carefully. That's the scale. This is the feather. Should I go back and forth? I didn't think so. Now, come on. Why? Why would absolutely unquestionably intelligent people, such as Dr. Romer and many others, and you can look in textbooks today, they say the same thing. Why do they say the differences are really not that great? I mean, this is positively ludicrous. And I would challenge any biologist. We got a visitor here who's an evolutionist and wants to talk about feathers and scales. This would be a good time to speak up. There are none. Okay. We're kind of hoping. Let's move on then and look at just what are the differences. It is, in fact, true that feathers and scales are totally dissimilar. Totally dissimilar. Let's go down the line. The mature structure is dissimilar. The function is dissimilar. The embryonic development is dissimilar. The mechanism of growth is dissimilar. The mechanism of replacement is dissimilar. The chemical composition is dissimilar. First of all, have you ever heard of the hair follicle? You've heard of that. Have you heard of the feather follicle?